Hi, I'm Whitney.
And I'm Camden. Welcome to Ghosts and Garnets, Murder in Idaho.
Murder, murder!
Murder! Maybe that should be our new intro music.
Totally. We should make up our own songs and everything. Welcome, guys, to episode number 2.
Yay!
Maybe episode number 3. Not sure yet.
Well,
We might throw something at you via Halloween. Oh man, guys, we tried to record this last night. It was a real shit show.
Total shit show.
We were not on our game.
No, it was lackluster, and may I even say boring, which we are not.
It was boring.
Which we are not.
We're not boring. We also had a lot of audio issues, and hopefully we do not tonight, because I cannot record this thing for a third time. But this is a really good story. This is actually going to be a 2-parter. We are going to be talking about the OG lady serial killer, Flypaper Lyda. Shockingly, I have never heard of this story, which is crazy talk because I am like an actual lunatic about true crime stuff. And
what were you doing when we were in junior high and I was reading this book at my parents' cabin in Donley and being obsessed with all things weird?
See, I thought I had read every book that your family had.
You would think, but alas.
Yeah. And you guys, Cam and I have been besties since preschool. So there's a lot of history here. So we'll try not to make you crazy with it. But
or we will. Whatever.
Yeah, who knows? You're stuck with us. Also, I thought it would be a good idea because I noticed that some of the people that are following the podcast are not from Idaho. And for those of you who don't know a lot about Idaho or think that we're all potato farmers or think that we are Iowa, which I think happens a lot.
Yes.
We are located in the northwest part of the United States. We are surrounded by Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Montana.
Good girl. Woo!
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, we are a big-ass state. We don't have a lot of population, considering how big we are. But we got a lot of crazies. So that's just a little bit of background on Idaho for you. Yes. So Flypaper Lyda. Today we are going to be going through her early years, her first few marriages, the hunt for her. And then in part 2, we'll get into a little bit of a capture, a trial, an incarceration, an escape, another incarceration, and maybe another marriage. I'm not sure. It's a lot. And a ton of information in this story came from a book I read called Lady Bluebeard by William Anderson, which is the book that Camden was talking about that her parents had that I apparently never read.
So true. They probably still have it. I was going to say, we don't really talk about this in the story, but I found it really interesting that her nickname, Lady Bluebeard, they were assuming it was because of the legend of Bluebeard himself, who had 7 wives, and he
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he killed a bunch of them, and she is suspected of killing most of her husbands.
Yes.
So, and Bluebeard is now shorthand for serial killer. I did not know that.
Shut the front door.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Interesting.
Well, that's very interesting. And we'll talk about it kind of at the end of the story or middle of the story. But they said that the first time that the term serial killer was used was in reference to this case, to this woman. So she's not a bad bitch, but she was ahead of her time, really.
She's that bitch.
She's that bitch. So let's get started. A little after midnight on April 2nd, 1921, 7 men stood in the snow surrounding the grave of Ed Meyer in Twin Falls Cemetery. Ed had been in the ground since September of 1920, and now the ground was frozen, making the task of digging Ed up a little difficult. The 3 grave diggers worked as Deputy Sheriff Virgil Ormsby, State Chemist Ed Rodenbaugh, Chemist Ed Dooley, and Coroner Grossman waited in the snow for the emergence of the casket holding the remains of Ed Meyer to appear. The grave was eventually exhumed, and the casket was secured to a truck and driven to the undertaker's office. Once on the table, the body of Ed Meyer showed almost no decomposition. Coroner Grossman remarked on how well preserved the body was. Then he began the long overdue autopsy of Ed Mayer.
Now, Ed had died quite unexpectedly after eating a meal made by his brand new wife, Lyda. He was taken to the hospital and seemed to be recovering until a visit from Lyda. Ed was dead, and the doctor listed the cause of death as typhoid fever, despite the fact that Ed didn't have a high temperature. His new, young, pretty wife of 1 month was extremely distraught, and he thought to move things along to help her in her grief. Ed's newly purchased life insurance policy, worth $12,000, listing her as sole beneficiary, would probably help her in her grief, too. People in town are starting to talk. Poor Lyda was already a widow, 3 times over. Earl Dooley, a chemist and a buddy of Lyda's first dead husband, Robert, started asking questions. The insurance company requested an autopsy. Once Lyda heard the word autopsy, she very quickly left town, foregoing the collection of Ed's life insurance payout. Ed was buried without autopsy, and life went on in Twin Falls until the following year, when Ed was exhumed and the results of his autopsy would trigger an investigation that would span 6 states, Mexico, and an ocean crossing. Lyda was in the wind.
Not kidding about this being a massive story. So not kidding. Trying to compress it all into one. There's no way. And we were talking about this last night. It is crazy that there has not been a movie made about this story.
Yes, I'm dead. And what I want to do is I want to figure out who would play Lyda. Who would do it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Think about that.
Well, let's talk about Lyda. Lyda was born Anna Elizabeth Trueblood and was the third of 11 children. The family lived on a farm in Keatsville, Missouri. She was a petite, blue-eyed redhead and was known as charming and popular. Her good looks attracted men, quote, like flies to a honeypot. One of those men was Robert Dooley, who fell hard for Lyda. They began dating when Lyda was 14. In 1906, Lyda's father saw an ad for apples grown in Idaho. In this ad, it showed rich, fertile lands outside of Idaho Falls, and this very happy farmer holding a massive apple in his hand. And at that point, he decided he was going to uproot his entire family and move them 6 states away. Maybe more than 6 states. I did not look at a map. That was just a shot in the dark.
Someone's definitely going to prove you wrong. I feel it, or right. Either way.
Unfortunately, once arriving, they discovered that the soil was unfit for farming and there was no water source available. They struggled from that point on to feed everyone in the family, and Lyda was pissed about being poor. Luckily for her, Robert, her Missouri boyfriend, and his brother Ed followed them to Twin Falls, and in March of 1912, when Lyda was 19 years old, she married Robert. They lived at Robert's ranch along with his brother Ed. All seemed well, and in 1914 they welcomed a daughter whom they named Lorraine and called Lorianne. Then some shit started happening, and the timeline is a little sketch on this stuff surrounding her daughter. It doesn't make a huge bit of difference in the story, so I'm just going to report it as I found it in the book, but it has been reported differently in other places. First, baby Lorraine died of ptomaine poisoning, which is essentially an infection caused by drinking dirty well water, and this is according to Lyda. Now, some sources list the baby's death as occurring 4 years later in 1918. But for sure, in August 1915, Robert's brother Ed began to get sick. He developed stomach cramps and nausea and died very shortly after. Robert and Lyda returned his body to their family in Missouri and then went back to Idaho. Ed's life insurance policy, which had recently doubled to $2,000, was split between Lyda and Robert. 2 months later, Lyda's husband Robert fell ill with the same symptoms as his brother, and he died on October 12th. 1915. His cause of death was listed as typhoid fever. Lyda again made the trip to Missouri, this time to bury Robert. She then collected $2,500 from his life insurance policy.
So, first time using serial killer. Also, was this like the first example of false advertising for this lush southern Idaho apple?
You know, there wasn't Google back then. You couldn't be like, hey, is this farmer bullshitting me about the fertile lands of southern Idaho? P.S. Southern Idaho is one big fucking desert.
Like, we love you.
Anything down there?
We love you, Southern Idaho friends. However, lush, you
You're
are
not growing
not.
giant apples.
No. Also, I was doing some research because I thought, well, this bitch keeps killing people for their life insurance. How much is $2,000 back in the 1920s ish?
Yeah.
So $2,000 equaled about $29,000, a little over. So
Jesus. That's a significant amount of money for Ed.
yes. She could
Holy
live.
shit. So that's like between Ed and Robert just then, she made like 50 grand.
Right.
Jesus.
First husband.
All right, Lyda. All right.
Let's go, Lyda. Lyda, who is now in her mid-20s, was alone, but she had Robert's property and the insurance money to support herself. Less than 2 years after Robert's death, she met William McAfee, and in June 1917, the two were married. With the proceeds from the life insurance policies and the sale of Robert's property, the McAfees moved to Hardin, Montana. In late September, William became ill with severe stomach cramps and fatigue. Dr. W.A. Russell made a visit to the McAfee ranch. He found both William and Lyda in bed, Lyda stating they were both ill. But while Lyda had no symptoms, William was clearly very ill. Along with his stomach issues, he had a very high fever. So this was during the worldwide influenza pandemic, and the doctor diagnosed William as having the flu. He gave Lyda instructions on how to care for him and left. The doctor visited the next day and found William in bad shape. He was clearly deteriorating, and there wasn't much he could do. He died October 1st, 1917, scarcely 4 months after their wedding, leaving Lyda a widow for a second time. Since this was in the midst of the Spanish flu pandemic, with bodies piling up in morgues, an autopsy was not performed. Based on the symptoms Lyda described, William's cause of death was listed as influenza and diphtheria. Again, it was a common infection brought on by drinking tainted water. When Lyda attempted to collect the $5,000 life insurance policy, she was informed it had lapsed because of a late payment and could collect nothing. I bet she was pissed.
Well, I didn't put this in, but in the book, she attempts to bring, after William is dead, she attempts to bring the late payment to the insurance salesman, who informs her that they are not in the habit of insuring dead men.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
So according to the symptoms Lyda describes, the coroner or the whoever was like, oh, well, cool. I'll take your word for it. He's gonzo. Cool.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah, I get that it's like 1915. They know enough to be able to test for things. They know enough to be able to test to see if the water is shitty. They do have those tests at that time. And I guess just because, she was in Montana and the first ones were in Idaho Falls, I'm not sure. But yeah, it is sketch that nobody thought it was weird that this healthy man suddenly just keeled over one day.
She must have been a
some bad water.
real charmer. She was a real...
Apparently she was a real charmer. Before we continue the rest of the story, I want to tell you guys, there are many Eds in the story. I think there are 4 different Eds. And there are 2 different Ed Dooleys. They are unrelated to one another. They have the same name. It's very confusing. We will do our best to try to differentiate between them, but there are many Eds.
The most.
Next, Lyda meets poor Ed Mayer, the body from the beginning of the show. Now, Ed was a German farmer. He was a great big man and was known to be extremely shy. He was a foreman at Blue Lakes Ranch, which was just outside of Twin Falls. According to Ed's co-workers, Lyda was working at the Grill Cafe diner in town as a waitress and convinced Ed to marry her in secret less than 1 month after they had met. Now, Lyda had been living in a hotel in town and did not move in with Ed after the wedding. Not sure how she pulled that off. According to Ed's co-workers, Lyda only visited the ranch twice before Ed fell ill. Once overnight, and once on the 26th of August to cook lunch for the ranch workers. After the meal, both Ed and another worker named Ben Squires got violently ill. Squires recovered, and we all know what happened to poor Ed.
I also found something stating that reports said she put the arsenic in soup and apple pies. So, I wonder, oh my God, what if she was so pissed about being poor because the apples wouldn't grow. So then she decided to poison everybody and get money from apples in her pie. What? My mind is blown.
You have cracked the case again. First the fingers and now the pie.
I know. And also, there's trace amounts of arsenic in apple seeds. So, whatever. Do what you will.
You know what? This makes a lot of sense now. At the beginning of the book, there's an apple pie recipe that I totally skipped over.
Well, I'm certainly glad you did.
It says Lady Bluebird's apple pie recipe.
Shut up! Oh my God. Make it for Thanksgiving, please, God. Dead. That's great.
I don't enjoy a bake.
Well, maybe
I'm not patient enough to bake. Like, I love cooking. Horrible at the baking.
Same.
I can't measure stuff.
Same.
I can't. I don't have the patience for
What
it.
about Russ? Saint Russ. Does he bake an apple pie?
Russ does not bake. He actually does not cook.
Well,
very often.
maybe one of our followers could make that pie and let us know how it tastes.
Yes. You know, the best apple pie I ever had was when I was pregnant with Poppy, and my cousin-in-law, Jess Joy. Hi, Jess. She sent me an apple pie in the mail. She didn't make it. She sent it from
factory,
a pie factory, but it was delicious.
That's thoughtful.
And I'm not a big pie fan, but my 9-month pregnant self was really excited.
It's all over that.
Yes, we have gotten way off.
But I digress, and that brings us back to another Ed. Ed Dooley, one of the chemists present at the exhumation of Mayer's grave. He was highly suspicious of Lyda and all of her dead husbands. He was buddies with Lyda's first husband, Robert. So he decides to do some investigating and heads to Robert and Lyda's old farm and takes a soil sample from the ground where Robert supposedly died. He tests the soil sample at his lab. It tests positive for arsenic. He asks 2 other men, a doctor and another chemist, to check his findings. Both men agree the soil contains arsenic. Ed takes his results to the state prosecuting attorney, Frank Stefan. Frank orders Robert Dooley's remains to be exhumed and tested for arsenic. Robert's body is shown to contain a high amount of arsenic, enough to have killed 5 men. Enter Deputy Sheriff Virgil Ormsby, who, in this story, is a total badass sheriff.
He's the bad bitch of the story.
He is the bad bitch of the story. Sheriff Ormsby starts an investigation that would last 8 months. It would be the road trip from hell. First, he visits the Dooley farm, where he speaks to the new tenants. Neighbors reported Lyda and Ed Dooley, her brother-in-law, hated each other. The house was a mess when the new tenants moved in, and they had the water tested, worried about contamination because of the deaths, but the water tested normal. He then traveled to Missouri to meet with the father of Robert and Ed, Alfonso Dooley. Alfonso was pissed it had taken so long for there to be an investigation. He said they had been suspicious since she returned with Robert's body. Lyda showed no sadness and became irate when questioned about the death. Ormsby's next stop was Hardin, Montana. He goes to the office of the Dr. Russell, who had taken care of William before he died. He reported that he had not suspected poison because of the influenza outbreak. He said Lyda was neglectful in taking care of her husband and didn't seem to care if he lived or died. Last because she didn't. Well, actually, she did care if he lived.
Yeah, she did not want him to live.
No.
So Dr. Russell reported the following encounter to Deputy Ormsby. He says, "On my last visit, I saw him staring at his wife. I could swear I saw a very malevolent look in his eyes, almost a look of cold hatred. He said the house was so tense, and that's why he remembered the visit so well. It was so tense, but it was the flu." That's what he said. It was the flu. Next, Deputy Badass Ormsby visits the home once occupied by Lyda and William McAfee. Now a couple called the Hannafins lived there, and this was the fucking jackpot. Mrs. Hannafin reported that one day a very attractive farm machinery salesman showed up. His name was Harlan Lewis. She said Lewis gave Lyda one look, and it was like she was hypnotized. From that point on, Lyda and William fought nonstop. Mr. Lewis visited quite a bit, and Lyda, quote, appeared to be under some kind of spell. Then William died. So the deputy asked permission to search the home. The couple led him down to the basement, where he finds a barrel containing a foot-high stack of flypaper. At the time, flypaper contained arsenic, which could easily be extracted by boiling in water or soaking in water. He also finds a large aluminum saucepan with a corroded line near the top of the pan. He goes into town and finds a clerk who recalls selling Lyda a large amount of flypaper. more than anyone would ever need. As Deputy Ormsby is making his way to the train station, he notices a tall man following him. He remembers the man from the lobby of his hotel. Once on the train, the man approaches Virgil and introduces himself as a friend of Harlan Lewis. You remember Harlan Lewis is the dreamy-eyed salesman. Then he drops the bomb that not only did Lewis and Lyda marry after William's death, but Lewis is now dead after a very sudden illness. And confiding in this man, he had taken out a $10,000 life insurance policy with Lyda as the beneficiary.
These men!
Golden vagina, I'm telling you.
I was thinking the same thing. You said it. A couple of weeks later, Ormsby receives a call from a woman in Boise named Mary Staples, who is a childhood friend of Lyda's. A mutual friend had told her that the police were looking for Lyda. She told Ormsby that she had received a postcard from Lyda the month before and it had come from San Francisco. In the postcard, Lyda had mentioned that she was having a good time because of all the sailors in town. I'm sure she was. Miss Staples also mentioned they had a friend who lived there named Delane Risley. Ormsby headed to San Francisco, where he met with the San Francisco Police Department, who agreed to help him track Lyda down. Unfortunately, by the time they found the address of Delane Risley, both women had left town and had gone to L.A. Once he got to L.A., he met Detectives Fox and Nolan, who were assigned to help him in his search, and they finally located Delane Risley. Delane told them that Lyda had run off with a Spaniard gambler who was called, and I shit you not, El Zorro.
Zorro.
That is my favorite. Again, with the movie.
I'm telling you, this should be a movie.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, maybe it's too unbelievable. You know, reality is always stranger than fiction. So maybe they're just like, this is too much. Too much.
Yeah. Well, the trio of lawmen did some digging and found out that El Zorro was not in fact Spanish but Mexican and had left for Mexico a couple of weeks before with a woman matching Lyda's description. They were headed to Tijuana. Have you ever been to Tijuana?
No. I have not. Have
you?
Yeah, no.
No. I remember the guides. That's not a story for here. Okay. Once in Tijuana, they met with a contact of Detective Fox's who owned a gambling den. The contact gave them an address of a house where El Zorro was supposedly staying with a woman. Now, they got a bit overexcited at hearing this and decided that rather than get the local police involved, they were just going to raid the house themselves, the three of them, in Mexico.
Tijuana, to be clear.
So, this plan turned out to be a bad idea, as the people occupying the house were not in fact who they were looking for. This eventually led to a visit to the police station, where they were told that the man they had tried to apprehend in the house was in fact an undercover police officer, and the house they raided was a whorehouse.
This is my favorite.
It was an out-and-out blunder.
I was just thinking that.
Well, they struck out in Tijuana. The police chief there told them they need to go to Ensenada, where they would find the real El Zorro working as a croupier at the Owl Gambling House. I'm assuming a croupier is like a dealer of some kind or like a blackjack spinner of some kind. I know very little about the gambling.
Same. I know nothing. I'm terrible.
So they did decide this time to involve the local police after the whorehouse incident. Within 30 minutes, El Zorro himself was escorted inside the police station. Ormsby explained the reason for the visit and asked about Lyda. El Zorro was shown a photo of Lyda, and he said that he knew her as Edith Eva Mayer, and that she was not with him anymore because she had gone to San Pedro to work in a cafe. So they headed to San Pedro. And I'm telling you, all of this travel, just the idea of this trip makes me physically uncomfortable. The idea of just going from place to place to place, searching, I could not live in a time where there were not telephones.
No, it's exhausting. It's annoying.
I would have given up. Like,
It's
I would have been
maddening.
a terrible lawman because I would have just been like, you know what? I've been to 3 towns in Mexico now. I'm very tired. I don't care if she kills more people.
Right.
I just want to go and have a nap.
Right, like if she kills somebody else, I mean, it's on them. Once they reached San Pedro and the cafe where Lyda said she'd be working, they showed her picture around, and another waitress said she'd seen her a couple of weeks before, when she'd come to get in her mail, but that she had left again. Then the waitress mentioned a secret Lyda had told her. Lyda said she may marry a petty officer named Paul Southard, who was in the Navy. And, just their luck, the San Pedro Navy Yard was just around the corner. The commander of the Navy Yard listened to the detectives and pulled Southard's records. It seemed that Paul Southard and Edith Eva Mayer had married in L.A. on November 28th, 1920. Lyda said she was a nurse. Liar, liar. Pants on fire.
Pants on fire.
Then Petty Officer Southard and his new wife were transferred to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, where they now resided together. Ormsby, exhausted and frustrated, understandably, left a message for the Honolulu Police Department to call him about a fugitive and finally headed back to Idaho.
Poor guy. So tired. I'm so tired thinking about it.
I think you're ready for sleepy time.
I'm in my robe. It's 7:30 at night. I'm an old lady. I'm going to go to bed when we're done here.
I'm so jealous.
So, while Virgil was hopping about the country, searching for the fugitive, Lyda, the man killer, the bodies of her other victims were all exhumed one by one. Each showed a toxic amount of arsenic in their bodies. Only Lorraine, the baby, or the 4-year-old, depending on timelines, her tests for arsenic were inconclusive, though she was much smaller than other children her age, and there were suspicions that she had been starved to death, which makes me very sad.
Ill, yes.
And finally, on April 22nd, 1921, Lyda Mayer was formally charged. Now they just had to catch her.
That is wild. She had killed 6 people by the time she was 27, including her daughter, which is just 6 by 27. Like, by 27, I was barely, like, making my bed every day and learning how to make a
Didn't
BLT.
you have 2 kids by 27?
Okay, I know, but how do I keep them alive for so long? I mean, I did. Yes, you are not wrong, but it's a miracle they're still alive.
Well, you got them there.
I mean, okay, all right. Obviously, I was figuring out a few more things at 27, but I certainly had no time to kill 6 people. I mean, I guess I could have tried harder.
Well, you know, next week we're going to get into some really interesting stuff. Her capture and her trial is a trial in Idaho in the 1920s. It's really something. Her incarceration at the very famous Idaho Penitentiary. There's some really good stories there. There's some gold teeth involved in her escape. Maybe some more husbands, maybe some more deaths.
Well, also, I mean, the warden built her wooden trellises to put outside of her window for climbing roses. Let's be clear. This woman.
Trellises.
Oh, they were iron?
Iron trellises.
Okay, that's even worse. She does have a golden vagina. 100%.
I'm telling you. Well, and even the warden let this woman, who is a poisoner, take care of his sickly wife.
I know. I cannot wait for the next half of this.
Well, she was a prisoner.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is.
It's crazy.
I think by the next episode, I'm going to have a list of characters and who's playing him in the movie. So, you know, somebody out there in the movie world, contact me. We'll get this figured out.
Let us know.
Yes. So awesome.
You know who I see playing Lyda? You know the lady who... Did you see the Harry Potter movies?
Well, yes.
Okay. You know the bad lady who always wore pink and had all the cats?
Yes.
That's who I see playing Lyda, like, in her older years.
Oh, all right. I can get on board with that. Yeah. I was thinking of, like, who's playing Lyda when she's young. Like, I'm looking for the start.
Yeah,
you went right to the finish.
Yet, but definitely, evil cat lady from Harry Potter.
I can see that.
I would play her when she was, like, in prison. Yeah, I'll definitely post the pictures and stuff. There are tons of really good pictures, specifically from the book that I'll post, that have her, like, posing with the warden and the cop who caught her. You know, like,
also,
they're all smiling and dressed nice.
I also am going to put in a request that I guess I could do it too. Who knew? But I think it should probably all be on one post. Let's post the apple pie recipe. All right. Well, anyway, so that is part 1 of Flypaper Lyda, or Lady Bluebeard. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with us.
And if you did, please like and subscribe. Hate with me in the world. You can follow us on Instagram at Ghosts and Garnets Podcast, or on Facebook at Ghosts and Garnets Murder in Idaho. We will be posting photos to go with the story, and if you have any suggestions or comments, please leave them there so we can see them.
Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.